Hey there, it's Kate again. So, if you made it through that last video on the AB process of alcohol, congratulations, because it's science heavy and kind of boring. And I also want to say it's obvious there's a lot more to getting sober than just understanding the science of addiction. It's not as easy as saying, "Oh, alcohol gives me anxiety, so I'm just going to quit." If that were the case, we wouldn't be here. So let's dive into some real talk about some of the possibly invisible barriers on this journey: fear, shame, limiting beliefs that we carry. And I hope that as we discuss these, you can see how it lessens the grip that they have over us so we can move forward, because forward momentum is the goal here toward freedom. Before we dive in, I want to revisit the faucets of freedom that I brought up in the first video, and they fall under the acronym of WAC. And these are words I just keep repeating over and over throughout the journey of recovery because it's so important. W, willingness. We have to have the willingness to try new things, to take new advice, to go down this journey in the first place, and to trust that those that came before us know what they're talking about. H, humility, honesty, humor. Those are crucial things along this path. I constantly remind my clients, like, we have to laugh. This is hard. This is hard stuff. We have to continue to return to humility and honesty. Honesty being so important because whoever you choose as your sponsor or your guide or your mentor or coach, you have to be honest with what you're going through so they can help you on this journey. And then the A for abstinence, of course. Abstinence from all mind and mood altering drugs. And C for consistency. Small things done repeatedly over time, consistently. It takes something like 21 days to build a new habit. And I'll also talk about neuroplasticity here. So, consistency is incredibly important. I just wanted to revisit these one more time before we get started. Let's start with shame because it's one of the biggest roadblocks to recovery. It's that voice in your head that says, you're not good enough. You're not going to be able to do this. You're broken. Or no one could understand what you've done in active addiction. No one can understand all the things you've done when you're drinking. And shame thrives in secrecy. And that's why I reiterate how important it is to go to meetings in the beginning. I always say go to 90 meetings in 90 days because you want that community to step out of that feeling that you have to hide and that secrecy. Because secrecy makes you want to hide all your struggles, and because you're afraid of what other people will think, right? And it keeps you stuck because shame isn't just about what you've done while you're drinking. It's about who you believe that you are, because it's who you believe that you've become in your drinking. It creates this false identity that we develop where we think we're defined by our worst moments. Shame says you didn't just do a bad thing, you're a bad person. And it's really helpful to talk with someone openly and honestly about these stories so that shame loses its power over you. Because time and time again, I see people continue to drink, continue to hide because they're filled with shame. I even do this thing with my clients I call pound for pound. Whatever you got, bring it to me. Whatever shameful thing you did while drinking, I will go pound for pound with you. Meaning that you list some ridiculous thing, I can probably top it. It's not to one up you, it's to show you that we're all human. And I particularly have a pretty significant story, and I've hit rock bottom. So let's go pound for pound. What do you got? Bring it to me. I can probably top it with some of the humiliating, shameful things I've done while drinking. And this exercise makes us laugh out loud and relax into our humanness. It releases the power of some of that shame. So I thought it was important to talk about shame here because shame is what keeps us stuck. And I don't want people to feel alone living in this secret hell that is the shame of what we've done while drinking. Let's talk about fear. So, fear is another player here, and it's playing dirty because fear shows up in so many different ways on this process. It sort of keeps us in a comfort zone. Even though our addiction is destructive, even though drinking is completely destructive, it's the devil we know. And we are so afraid of the unknown. I know in particular, my life was horrible drinking, but I was afraid to get sober because I had no idea what my life sober was going to look like. I had no idea what the journey was going to look like. Fear shows up like, I'm afraid I'm going to leave my partner if I get sober. I'm afraid my partner's going to leave me. I'm afraid I'll be boring. I'm afraid that, sex will be difficult. I'm afraid dating will be difficult. I'm afraid I'm afraid I'll miss out. Fear, fear, fear. And it creeps up as we go. So it's important to recognize that this is not only an invisible barrier, but it's going to come to the surface a lot. And that's why honesty and humility are super important here. We're all afraid. Every one of us is afraid because we've never done this before. So I want to reiterate, you don't have to eliminate fear to get started. You just have to have the willingness to move forward. I mentioned invisible barriers like fear and shame, maybe sometimes not so invisible. But those barriers create limiting beliefs for us that we sort of build into our story, into the core of who we are. And they're called limiting beliefs for a reason. They create sort of a ceiling on what we think we can accomplish or we think we can do. And they're not based on facts. They're just based on stories we've told ourselves that have built a mental groove over time. And I want to tell you, one of my main limiting beliefs going into sobriety was that it was going to change my life in the aspect that I would miss out on so much stuff. I wouldn't be cool anymore. Deep down, I was going to miss out on everything. I thought no one's going to invite me anywhere. Therefore, sobriety was just going to have to be this choice I made to remain boring and uncool. And it took some time and some work for me to peel back those layers. First of all, I had to prove to myself that I could have fun in sobriety because I had to sort of disprove my own limiting belief. And I had to verbalize it. I had to talk out loud about all of my fears and my shame and my struggles. And saying it out loud sort of brought that limiting belief to the surface of, oh, this is what's underneath all that. I'm not going to get sober because I'm afraid that I won't be cool and that I'll miss out on everything, that I won't get invited. Maybe deep down, I'm afraid of being alone. I mean, I could go on forever here, but the amount of limiting beliefs we build around our drinking story and our drinking selves, it's pretty exceptional. And it just takes some time to peel all of that stuff back. But inevitably, unless we do, those limiting beliefs, those are going to be huge barriers for us to get sober. The last thing I want to mention here, because I would be remiss if I didn't talk about this, is stigma. The judgment we're going to get from society by saying we no longer drink alcohol, maybe even implying that we had a problem with alcohol, the stigma and the judgment can be brutal. We live in a society that loves drugs and alcohol, but we hate addicts and alcoholics. So I can't help but talk about this because it becomes something that resurfaces in conversations I have with clients. What are people going to think if I say I'm not drinking? What are people going to think if they find out that I used to be a problematic drinker, or that I couldn't control it, or that I had to go to meetings? And this can be a barrier for getting and staying sober because we want to keep so much of this hidden. Here's the thing. You're going to face stigma. You're going to face other people's opinions no matter what. You are saving your own life here. So it's important to stay like tunnel vision focused on your own recovery. And the landscape of recovery has changed. We are no longer hiding out in church basements. There's an entire movement to recover out loud. And this has allowed people like me to have a platform for sobriety and recovery and dispel some of those fears and limiting beliefs, and even help to heal some of my own shame. Because it's a lot different than it was when I first got sober. It's actually not even as cool to drink anymore. I mean, there's an entire sober curious movement. I mean, you can look on Instagram, hashtag sober curious, hashtag sober curious movement. My point is that no matter how far we evolve as a society, there's always going to be judgment. There's always going to be stigma. People are always going to have an opinion about the way you lead your life. You have to make the decision that you're going to move forward for your own health, for your own mind, body, and spirit. And as time goes on, you will make friends that are sober. You will make friends who are on this same path. And the stigma won't sting so much. But please know that these recovery communities are here to support you throughout this process, because we all know what it feels like. We've all had people call us drunks, alcoholics, addicts, junkies, you name it. The stuff people say, there's a massive, even with healthcare providers, there's a massive level of uneducated people that are going to come into your oikos that say ignorant things about sobriety and recovery. And I'm here to tell you, it's just not worth giving up your peace and your sobriety for. I'm going to close this out by saying this is stuff we all go through. Fear and shame and the stigma and all the limiting beliefs. This is a process everybody goes through in healing. And I want you to know that I'm cheering you on wherever you're at in your journey. I've certainly been through all of this, and it's a process of uncovering over time. It's possible to get there, though. I promise you that. And this journey can be really fun. I encourage humor because it's the humanness that's coming out in all of us. And a lot of this can be really funny. We don't have to take ourselves all that serious. This can be one of the most incredible journeys of your life. This adventure awaits you. I just hope you're willing to take the next step.